Well, hello and welcome to the Biz Coach Show, hosted by my Biz Coaches and presented by the TLG Group. Your hosts today are David Macon, that's me, and Eric Whitmore. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing ecstatic. Thank you. I am ecstatic. Thank you, David. I'm recognizing we're recording episode number 20 today.
I know, pretty significant, right? We're making some progress. So awesome. Well, if you're new to our show, if this is the first episode you're checking out, we're glad you joined us. We're focused on giving entrepreneurs the edge they need to succeed. And 20 episodes, a lot of good content. Definitely encourage you to go back and check out some of our past episodes, but also subscribe so you don't miss future episodes because we have a lot of great content, whether it's just Eric and I unpacking a topic, or we have a lot of great guests that hop on the show as well. And we'd love to share that with you. So don't forget to subscribe and connect with us on social media. Well, Eric, today we are talking about, I think, a pretty important topic, which is knowing your business. And this actually kind of came up organically in a conversation we had on another episode and said, hey, we should probably do an episode just on that. So here we are, we're doing that. So we're going to go through just a few things that we think are important for small business owners to understand, or maybe even somebody thinking about starting a business, that they should do some research on before they begin their business. And this isn't an all-encompassing list, but we do think these are some of the key points that'll get you set up for success and put you on the right track. So let's talk about maybe the first thing, which is the market, right? The marketplace in which we're going to be launching our business into. So what are some thoughts you have on that, Eric? What should small business owners be thinking about when it comes to knowing your business and knowing your market?
Yeah, so I'm going to use a few stories to illustrate the things you don't want to do.
Nice.
So I have a real life version of this. So knowing your market, right? For instance, I'm going to use the analogy. You remember the coffee shop that we owned quite a few years ago?
Yeah.
And pretty excited. It was a great opportunity to kind of break into something, and I didn't know a ton about at the time. My partner was the craft coffee connoisseur, we'll call him, and we went and did tastings and all that fun stuff. But what I brought to the table was the retail experience, the having worked in a restaurant, the finance and some of the legal components, right? So I was familiar with all that, and that was the role that I played. And then our third partner was more of a marketing specialist. So the three of us collaborated on this project, and you know, as we talk about knowing your market, right? Who's your end consumer? So one of the things that as much as we had the conversations and discussed about what was important to these people with craft coffee specifically was good quality coffee, one. Right. And no offense to some of the big national brands that are out there, but they don't typically really sell good quality coffee. They sell a lot of sugared, milk products that they throw together. Anyway, the people that like craft coffee, they want really good quality coffee, and it's knowing what they wanted was super important in launching that business. So we invested some time. We had some really good baristas. We acquired an existing business, and one of the mistakes that we made was assuming that everybody understood what we understood, which was, like for instance, when we acquired the business, and those probably fixed to some of the other tactical things that we're going to discuss today too, is we knew that the average, after doing the research, we knew that our average ticket per consumer was about $4.40. So I did some due diligence, and I'm like, okay, so what we need to do is drive that to about $7.50 per ticket. And all we need to do is get an uptick. Let's use your old analogy, David. It's like, how many people want to fry with that Coke or a fry and a Coke with that sandwich, right? That
right.
burger that you used to talk about. But the knowing your market, not all those people were into that, right? And so what they were choosing to upgrade into, or what they were willing to add to that cup of coffee, was took some time. We didn't know that going in inherently, and we even doing due diligence of shopping other competitors, right? We didn't really know what that was. So knowing your market, that's a piece of that. And I think the other thing I would incorporate into that message, that as we're thinking through it, when we acquired the business, I did all the financial due diligence. I was very confident that I did a quality job. And what was happening was we were losing business revenue, right, over time from the time we acquired it. What I failed to recognize, we as a collective company failed to recognize, was it wasn't the financial due diligence. It was the place in the market that this particular coffee shop that we acquired held. For instance, the shop had been around for 10 or 11 years. It was a little dated, needed some cleanup, which we were willing to do. We went in and did the cleanup work and everything like that. What had happened in the previous year before our company buying this existing coffee shop, they had opened 5 additional coffee shops within a 5-mile radius. You're preceding the time that we acquired it. And many of them were like not even a year. They were like 3 months before we bought it, 5 months before we bought it. And so what happened was, as those other shops opened up, and they were popular, they were newer, they were kind of like the flavor of the month kind of thing. Well, as they built momentum and got more people going to their shops, and again, they're only 2 or 3 miles away in some cases, it's around the corner kind of perspective, that what was happening was people were going and visiting these other shops and then becoming regulars there, while we were transitioning from the previous owner to our new ownership and making adjustments and things like that. So what ended up happening was they had a more defined strategy, whatever. And so consequently, we ended up losing market share to those 5 other shops that opened. And some of them were bakery shops that did coffee. Some of them were breakfast shops that had coffee, and some were actual, and what we had was a good coffee product. We filled it in with some food solutions and things like that, but they weren't the food solutions people were looking for. And consequently, as it evolved, we ended up just kind of petering out. And then the final nail in the coffin was the across the street, after 2.5 years of running the shop, a Jiffy Lube was acquired. An old Jiffy Lube that had been shut down was acquired and converted into it's called a SIP was the name of the company, but it was a craft coffee in the day and a craft brewery in the evening, because they took the basement. Yeah, they took the basement of the Jiffy Lube and converted that and made it like their keg room or whatever. And so, they had craft coffee during the day and craft beer at night. And I'm like, man, can't compete with that.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's there's a number of different lessons in that little bit of story, but I think that the understanding who your people are, what's important to them, knowing where in the industry, but like for instance in that particular market, knowing that 5 other shops had opened up, doing the due diligence, and I'm certain we could have gotten that data. I just didn't think to look for it.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think great illustration. I was just going to add, I think it's important too for businesses to be evaluating the size of the market too, right? Especially
great point. Yep.
Thinking about starting,
I think when we first looked at it, I'm like, there's only a couple coffee shops around town. Well, once we got in the car and started driving around, and it took us about 9 months, you started realizing, wow, there's a lot more coffee shops around here than we thought there were. Because initially we disregarded it as a bakery, but it's a bakery that has lattes and other drinks and stuff like that, and they have espressos and I'm like, oh no, that's just as much a coffee shop as we are, right?
Yeah.
Even if they're leading with their baked goods, right? And so that was, to your point, what's the addressable market out there?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's, and I think geography, right, as you're talking about, has a big, super local. A couple streets over, coffee shops can impact you. I think, I was thinking of the example of like starting a pool cleaning business or scaling your pool cleaning business. In Arizona, that's going to do great. In Utah, not going to do great. So it's just really understanding how big that market is. And that can, be a big factor based on what's around you, and important to do that research. And not only, how many people can you attract, but repeat customers and all of that. So very important to understand that market for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So awesome. Let's transition then. Once we kind of understand our market, let's look at our industry. So what's important for a small business owner to think about or know about their industry?
Yeah, and I think that this kind of as you think through that, I could go, like I said, I could go through a number of different stories over the years, but for instance, the wireless industry, right? The knowing that got a lot of background experience in that, but what's the industry who you like? Okay, so early days of the wireless industry, when I first did my own wireless entity, it was at that time it was very popular to do multi-carrier. So at the time, when I launched Just Right Wireless, we had I want to say 6 or 7 different wireless carriers in our shop. And that was a very popular play, was to have everybody available. What transitioned very shortly thereafter was that all the carriers were like, we don't know that we want you to have all those different brands. We want an exclusive brand. We want you to carry our brand exclusively, and maybe you can have a plus one. And a plus one wasn't necessarily another cell phone provider or wireless provider. It was often an internet carrier or a satellite TV solution or something like that. And so it changed the nature of the industry. I remember one of the last brands that existed, wireless toys, was a relatively popular brand. I think it started in Detroit, expanded pretty rapidly throughout the U.S. and a lot of it was a franchise brand that they did. But it was an aggregation of all these different wireless units, cell phones and some other brands and things like that. They probably more focused just on the phones specifically. But as the industry pivoted and people wanted exclusive brands, it was like, well, yeah, we've gotten to, all these different relationships, and now you need to get down to just one. Well, when you've got 6 brands, you look at it, no one carrier necessarily, in most of those cases, makes up 80% of your business. So you're not sure which one to go with. So now you're enticed by who's going to give me the most money and all that kind of stuff. So,
right.
But when knowing the industry and knowing what's going on in the industry and kind of seeing where the industry is going is another key component.
Yeah.
Right. So, when knowing that everybody was moving to a single brand, I don't know that anybody saw that. I know I didn't see it at the time, and I would have been comfortable staying the course of being a multi-carrier because I still felt like it was a better solution. Because if you walk into a T-Mobile store, they're going to sell you T-Mobile. They're going to sell you something else. Right. If you walk into a Verizon store, they're going to sell you Verizon. Now, it's not necessarily bad or good. And quite honestly, by the time the industry had evolved to the degree that it was, there's like a 5% variation between different carriers.
Right.
Verizon may be better in San Diego than it is in, LA or something like that. But generally speaking, we're here in Arizona. Verizon has always been one of the prime carriers in the market, mostly because this is one of their original markets, and all of their analog towers that converted to digital are all over the hinterlands of the desert and then right. Up in the mountains. And so they have some of the best network in the Arizona market. That's not true in some of their other markets.
Right.
Right. And so knowing that was another big thing. So anyway, as the industry pivoted to these specific one individual contracts, it was knowing, okay, where's the best play here? And as an individual business owner, basically for all intents and purposes, who do I align myself with?
Right.
And what does that do for my business? But understanding that, seeing that where it's going, as you talk about industry again as well with the some of the other business opportunities, pools. You mentioned pool cleaners, right? Well, the actual pool design is a whole nother thing, right? And there's a lot of changes in the industry there that have evolved over time.
Yeah.
And knowing kind of where everything's going there and making sure that you align yourself accordingly with that as well. So it's another big thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, right now, one of the things that, we've been talking about almost every episode is, how fast is the industry adopting technology, right? So not just individual competitors, but when you look at the aggregate of that, what's everybody doing across the industry? And if you're not doing what they're doing, you're going to fall behind. And I think about, recently we've seen customer preferences play into that, like, organic foods, right? So if you, operate a snack bar or something in a corporate lobby and people want more organic and you're not supplying it, you're going to start losing out on that. Or if I think about chiropractors, which I know we've both benefited from chiropractors over the years, but, if you're if you're a chiropractor and you're not doing, massage as part of your practice and, health and wellness or diets or supplementation, but every other chiropractor is doing that, you're now going to lose out because your clientele is expecting one thing and you're not delivering on it. So it's important to keep up on what the trends in the industry are and where the industry is headed for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I'll go you back and use the wireless as an example, but this is a big one. T-Mobile, when they introduced with Express, when we worked at Express, the consignment inventory solution.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, I literally was having this conversation with somebody last night. And I'm like, you have no idea what impact that made to the average wireless dealer in the industry, right? And this is shortly after, right? I mean, we're only talking a few years after this whole pivot to going exclusive to one brand. Yeah. And I'm like, I mean, cost of goods sold at one of my previous companies that I worked at, we were 63% cost of goods sold. That means you're trying to operate the business on 37% margins.
Yeah.
When you got that much money tied up in inventory, by the way, phones are coming out left and right as fast as, and literally we had gotten to the point, we had moved past the fact that a phone would be a value of significant value for like 3, 4, even 5 years in some cases, to the point where it was like I would say at that point, it was probably every year a new phone was coming out. I mean, every year a new phone was coming out, but it was like so much of a pivot that it was like, oh, you got to get the new phone. Yeah. And then you remember, we literally got to the point where it's like 3 months you buy a phone and 3 months later there was another phone that was far more advanced.
Yeah. There were a lot more manufacturers competing at that point. You had
too. Yeah,
BlackBerry, you had, Motorola. I mean, all of those were still really strong, and a lot of them are, some are dead and some are tapering off, but so every one of those manufacturers would have their flagship, which meant you had to, go buy, about 50 per location if you wanted to meet the demand, right, or more, and just for that initial order, and then, re-upping that order every week or month. It was a lot.
Yeah, and you're buying tens of thousands of dollars worth of inventory that would be outdated within a few months.
Yes, absolutely.
So moving to consignment inventory was a one play that T-Mobile did that they really captured a ton of market share, in my opinion, because they had committed to having their distribution done by dealers, right? Basically, for lack of a better term, a franchisor or franchisee, I should say. And allowing them to expand the brand and drive the sales revenue. So the problem was that the average small business owner couldn't afford enough inventory to drive the numbers that they wanted to achieve. So I know a lot of other carrier dealers, the other brands like AT&T, Verizon, and some of the other smaller ones as well, they weren't able to get the kind of results that we were able to get because we didn't have to worry about whether or not we had enough inventory. We just sold what we sold and then paid for it as we sold it. Yeah. And we would have 2 and 3 times the inventory that some of these other guys would have. And they would ask me all the time, how'd you get that deal? How'd you get that deal? I'm like, we're just that good,
Naturally.
Yeah. But that was a huge differentiator. And when you go back and you look at the annals of time and you look at the 2012 AT&T T-Mobile proposed merger that didn't go through, and then shortly thereafter, T-Mobile leaps ahead of AT&T, and then it starts competing, or it leaps to. I think there was another acquisition of the Sprint eventually did, but it basically made T-Mobile like the carrier.
Yeah.
On a lot of levels, right? I mean, there's arguments of who's the better or whatever, but when T-Mobile basically went from it's that carrier with no coverage to all of a sudden they're a major player and they're the only one getting net gains in the industry for quite a few years when we were doing it. Everybody else was having negative net gains because they're losing more clients than they're bringing in. It was a game changer. And a lot of that was because they had this mass distribution channel where we didn't have to worry about where we had enough inventory, and no other carrier was doing that. Yeah. So you mentioned paying attention to the industry and where's it going and who's if Verizon and AT&T had any sense at the time, they would have tried to implement a similar strategy.
Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point about timing, right? Within the industry, if you're getting into an industry, right, of course, timing is important. If you're getting out of an industry, right, could be important, but also
equally important.
Yeah. And there may be times, to really capitalize on growth, which we did a number of times when, things were going really good and you didn't have COVID and all those other things. And, let's double down right now because, the iron's hot. And then there's times where you need to read it and say, we need to scale back, or maybe even, shut down a couple of branches or reduce some of our staff because things are tough. And looking at those changes in that industry helps you make those decisions before they're necessary to save your business. You're doing it ahead of time so you can, safeguard your business, which is important.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's a good analogy. I mean, when we sold in 2017, I said it's just a matter of time, and this business is going to be a fraction of what it is today.
Yeah.
Since then, I think that I know for a fact that at least some of the major carriers have already done 2 swaths. You mentioned closing.
Yeah.
2 different times they've taken 10% of their total distribution and shut down 10% of all those, at least twice.
Yep.
One going into COVID, one during COVID, and I believe they did actually a 3rd time now since then. So that's 3 times. That's a 30% reduction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and now, like somebody mentioned to me the other day, they said they'd like to retain our services, helping them acquire a business as a coaching solution, right? Help them kind of guide them through that process. And I said, and they asked me about wireless, and I'm like, you don't want to buy a wireless store.
Yes.
That is not what you want to be buying today. So again, knowing your industry, right?
Absolutely. Cool. Okay, well, let's transition to your product and service, or product or service, depending on how you want to look at it, depending on what you're selling. So let's talk about that. Why is that critical as a business owner?
Well, and this is very, very basic in my opinion, but I mean, if you don't have a product or service that matches up with what's already out there, then you don't have a business, right?
Yep.
I do personally have really kind of adjusted to more service-based for a number of different reasons. One, ease of getting a business off the ground, scaling up a business. You're not limited to inventory control situations when you're creating a product. I mean, if you have a great product, then by all means. But there's not a lot of, you have to be really unique when it comes to a product design. Now, software is a little bit different, right? Because I mean, you can create a software, but generally speaking, if you look at tried and true businesses, product solution businesses, we've had laundry detergent for how many hundreds of years? You can only do so many variations to toothpaste or whatever. And yes, you can come up with something new and unique. But I like service-based businesses because more and more people are coming to grips with the idea of, I'm willing to pay for somebody to do this service for me. And you can do so much to differentiate in service versus a product.
Yeah.
In my experience, yeah. And I think, again, we're talking smaller business owners, right? There's a lot of money that gets tied up in a product design. Now, if you're already in a product-based business, by all means, right? But the key is to make sure that you have a great product.
Yeah.
With the service, you can determine what that looks like. That's kind of why I like the service-based industries. And there's so many new things that you can create, right? We talk all the time about solving problems. One of the most important things about determining what your product or service is, and then being clear on what the problem is you solve. So if I recognize there's a need in the market, I recognize there's an issue in the market, and I have a product or service that solves that issue, and I market effectively, it can't help but be successful. Right. But having a quality product or service is super important, because if you don't, like I said, you don't really have a business.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think one of the things that gets lost is, and we've talked about this a number of times, is if you're the person that starts that business, and you had that idea for the vision for that product or that service that you were going to bring to market, you tend to understand that product or service really well. I mean, maybe even you think it's better than maybe it really is because you're so passionate about it. But I think what happens is if you buy a business, or you're scaling your business and you get further away from that, new products are launched or new services are offered, you start to lose that kind of intimate awareness of the product or service, or your team does. And I think that's a miss that a lot of people make is, they need every person in their organization to fully understand the product and service at a pretty in-depth level, whether you're on the sales team or, customer service or fulfillment or the estimator, right? Everybody needs to understand that product really well. And a lot of times there's not a lot of effort that's focused on that. So people kind of get disjointed from what the driver of the business is, which is the sale of that product or that service. So I think whether you're the owner or, maybe you're the owner and you understand it, make sure your team understands it just as well so they get that passion for the product and service.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, kind of transitioning then, Eric, to USP. I know you've got a slightly different terminology that you use for that, but
That's right.
Let's just kind of talk about that for a little bit, because it kind of ties all of the three things that we just talked about together: the market, the industry, the product, the service. Kind of what is USP, if somebody doesn't know, and then why is it so important?
Yeah, so USP is your unique selling proposition. What is it that separates your product or service from others that are out there, right? And that is extremely important, because if you can't differentiate why your product or service is better than the average, then you're just like everybody else, right? And it really comes into play, quite honestly, when you're trying to market yourself. Now, what we use at my Biz Coach is a term called the market dominating position. And just slight twist on the same concept, but the idea being is, as opposed to being unique, right, I want to dominate my market. So I don't want to just be unique with my product or service solution. I want to be able to dominate my market. And it forces you to go a little bit deeper than being unique, right? What makes my product or service different than other products and services? But more specifically, what can I do to really kind of own my market, so to speak, right? And so here's the idea being is that when I'll use my brand at my Biz Coaches, what is it that allows us to dominate the market? What I believe allows us to dominate the market is we don't have, I'd say there's two or three key things, but the first one is it's not just a coach. I'm not an individual coach providing one solution based on my current life experiences. Yes, I have a lot of experience. Yes, I got a lot of insight. I've done a lot of different things over 25, 30 years, whatever it's been, that have provided me these insights that I can share with my clients. But more specifically, with the number of coaches that we have, it allows all of us collectively to collaborate with a client. Even if we don't do it directly and engage with the client, I can go back to my team and I can say, hey, talking to this particular client, here's where they're at. They're dealing with some of these challenges. What are some other ideas? Here's some of my ideas. What are some other ideas that you guys might have? And we collaborate, and we have people that are from other industries that have, but they have similar experiences in those industries with that type of product or service. And so we start talking about how could we really serve this particular client. So that's one way, right? Is that we have multiple coaches that are engaged in a particular client, even though it's not directly engaged with that individual one-on-one client solution, although it could be. We may do a brainstorming session where I take myself and two or three other my key coaches, and we get them on a call with a particular client because they have a specific need or challenge that they're trying to solve for. And we get in there and we brainstorm together. I mean, how valuable is that for the average business owner that probably doesn't even have any key leadership roles filled, and they're just looking to solve a problem, and they get on the phone with two or three other people and maybe even an accountant or a lawyer and have an opportunity to just kind of brainstorm the session and go through how we might be able to solve some of their challenges. So that market dominating, there's not a whole lot of other coaches out there, particularly the franchise coaching solutions, that do that, right? That offer that kind of solution. Not that they couldn't, but just currently nobody does it. And then I think the other thing is from a coach's perspective, we're aggregating our brand so that we can collectively use our marketing strategy to expand our brand and get it out in front of more people. So, when you talk about what's your market dominating position, what's the thing that sets your business apart from everybody else? And again, not just make you unique, but how can you dominate the market? And this is where niching is extremely important as well. Because the more you niche down, the more you can really own. So I might not own, let's say, for instance, restaurants. I may not be the best restaurant in Arizona, but if I can be the best Mexican restaurant in Arizona, that's something to strive for, and I can dominate my market there, right? Or if I, it's cleaners, any kind of janitorial or dry cleaner or something like that. It's like, what do you do better than everybody else?
Yeah.
How do you dominate your market? Well, let's say we're a dry cleaner. We turn everything over in 24 hours. I don't even know that's necessarily feasible, but it's like, you drop it off today, you have it tomorrow, right? I mean, that in itself, and I know for a lot of people who wait to the last minute to do certain things, that'd be super valuable, and people would pay a premium for that.
Right.
So when you are clear on who you're serving, and more specifically, what's most important to them, you can now create a market dominating position that allows you to determine your value in the market.
Yeah.
Right. So if I am doing things that nobody else is doing, I can charge a premium for my brand, or I can charge what everybody else is charging and really truly dominate the market, because I'm doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, but I'm doing it faster, less expensive, right? Because I've incorporated technology and I'm doing things that most other people in my industry aren't. That's a great way to try and dominate your market, is look at a market that's not terribly technically advanced and introduce the solutions that are out there. You just haven't made the time or the investment to do it. Incorporate that into your business, and now you can truly dominate your peers, and that allows you to really kind of take it to the next level, because you're offering better solutions and more effectively, more cost effectively, and chances are you could, even if you match the existing pricing models that are out there, you can do it in such a way that everybody's gonna be like, no, there's nowhere else for me to go. I have to go there. That's the place I need to go, because they solve my problem and they do it better than anybody else. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think it's critical to your point. I mean, it just brings clarity for you as the owner and your team to understand, who are we, what do we do, and what makes us different, and having everybody on that page is super important. But I also think, our sales background, right? The elevator pitch, right? You've got 30 seconds to communicate information about what you do. If you just tell them the first two things of who you are and what you do, okay, well, I know, 30 other people that do that same thing. But if you add in that market dominating position, that USP, you add that little twist that makes you different, makes you better, makes you unique. Not only, are you more likely to get more sales, but you're more memorable, right? And I think that's key, because a lot of businesses, right, technology is allowing people, those barriers to entry are down. So people are jumping into industries that traditionally were a little bit more, had more gatekeeping, right, to them. And so you're getting a lot more competition. So how do you stand out in that environment? It's that market dominated position.
Right.
So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Quick note, when we had the trucking business, we had a 98% on time delivery.
Awesome.
That in itself, that sheer statistic was one of the major contributors to allow us to grow our trucking business as quickly as we did.
Yeah.
Because brokers and other companies would hear about that, be familiar with it, and be like, we want these guys.
Yeah. A lot of trucking companies, you want the one that's always on time? Only one choice. That's us, right? So there you go. Awesome. But interesting, great transition to our final topic for today, which is know your key metrics. So great key metric there, 98% on-time delivery. There's so many other important metrics, and I don't know that we get into every metric, because I know you are a fan of metrics and spreadsheets and financials. So maybe we keep it a little surface level today, but maybe just talk about conceptually on a whole, why is it important for small business owners to have key metrics, to define those metrics, and how does that help their business?
So I'm not sure how to take that, David. Are you suggesting
you're very thorough, Eric. You're very thorough.
Yeah, no, but it's a great point. One of the things, and I would say it was probably the last two corporate opportunities that I had where, and if I call them that, they weren't really truly corporate, but they were bigger organizations that allowed me to really kind of dig in. The first experience was a singular dealer at the time, and I remember there was a the owner brought us together, a lot of key people, and we sat down and we talked about what were some of we didn't use the term. I don't remember anybody using the term key metrics, but we were dialing in some key numbers that would help us manage the business better. And every business struggles with whether or not, every business owner, I should say, struggles with whether or not they should share their data with their employees, like their financial data. Are we making a profit? How much profit are we making? How much does it cost to do these different things, to run this store, do that, whatever. And every business owner struggles with that. I've been with business owners that would never want to share that information. I have others that are like, you know what, I'm going to share it with everybody because at the end of the day, I think they'll make better decisions. I probably prescribe to the second strategy far more than I would with keeping it under wraps. But I can see there's reasons for that from time to time, particularly depending on the business. Now, the point here is that when you are very clear with the key metrics, the key drivers that really move your business, you don't need to worry about P&L statements so much as you can dial into these key metrics. And we say 7 to 10, it could be 7 to 12, but somewhere between 7 and 12, you have a handful of metrics that you can look at. You don't need to look at your P&L. Here's the problem with the P&L. And this is by far and away the biggest challenge with most business owners. They only look at their profit and loss statements, maybe occasionally their balance sheet and a few other, maybe a cash flow statement, but seldom do they get into those other documents. And they're not necessarily valuable to make important decisions on a day-in-and day-out basis. And the reason being is because when you're looking at that information is old. It's an accumulation of 30 days worth of data, which usually took a week or two to prepare or tie up and finalize. So what I'm looking at, so for instance, I sell on, what month are we in? April, right? So on March 1, we sold our first product for that month, and we sell through the 31st of March, and now it's April 19th, right? And as I'm looking at that and I say, okay, well, it's April 19th, they put all my numbers together and I sit down and look at that P&L. Is there any coaching? Let me rephrase it. Well, is there any timely coaching that I can provide right now that would have affected sales on March 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Right? I can go back and I can look at the data and say, hey, we didn't have a great month, or hey, we had a great month. But there is zero coaching I could have done to course correct throughout the month. And that's the problem with running your business and looking at your P&Ls, is you're waiting for your bookkeeping team, your accountant, whoever it is that's doing your numbers and providing that data to you. What you need are numbers you can get access to daily so that you can course correct daily.
Yeah.
We at the conference, we talked about that. Somebody asked me, point blank, because we were talking about metrics. And I said, look, at the end of the day, you have to be able to adjust your business daily. Because I used the plane analogy, right? The plane takes off from LA flying to New York, and if you in aeronautics and you fly at all, if I ask this question, I still get people who don't answer it, don't understand it. But it's the question is if I take off from New York or from LA and I fly to New York, what percentage of time is the aircraft off course? And the correct answer is like 98, 99% of the time. And people are like, what? And yet we land in New York on time, maybe even early, maybe occasionally late, but generally speaking, without any hitches. Because throughout the 3,000 plus mile trip, your computerized system is making micro adjustments based on wind variation and, I don't know, a bird flapping its wings or whatever it is that could potentially create any and remember, you're 3,000 miles. So how many different atmospheric changes you're going to go through, right? From flying over the desert to flying over the mountains and the Rockies, or flying over the plains in the Midwest, or at 8,000, 12,000, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, whatever, right? All the different, you're going to have all these different variations against a plane. So it's making all these micro adjustments. You have to run your business the same way.
Yeah.
You cannot go day 1 to day 30, and then at the end of the month, after you've got all your information, go back and recap and expect to actually make a difference. You can have it, recap it, and go through that, sure. But by the time now it's the 19th of April, if I get the information and I start thinking, okay, well, based on what I see from last month, right? And it wouldn't be unreasonable to get my data 10 to 15 days after the end of the month. So here it is, I'm looking at it and I'm like, and I finally get time. Okay. The accountant gave it to me on the 15th. It's the 19th. I'm looking at the data. David, let's sit down and talk about your business this month.
Yeah.
Well, it's already the 19th of April. Half this month is already gone now.
Yeah.
More than half.
Yeah.
So anything that I thought I could correct from March 1 till April 19th is irrelevant.
Yeah.
So this is why it's so important to have key metrics that you can dial in and you can literally track daily. At minimum, at absolute minimum, it has to be weekly. Yeah. So you can make adjustments. And so these things would be, like in the retail environment, how many people are you seeing a day? So we used to track door counts. If it's a service-based business, it's, how many impressions are hitting your website? Out of those impressions, how many people are downloading your free information that you're providing? If you're how many people are hitting the website? How many people are downloading your free information? How many people that download the free information are actually scheduling an appointment to learn more about your business? And out of those people, how many you're closing? Right. Well, you can literally get that information daily and recap it on a day in and day out basis. Right. So if you have a sales organization and you may be that one salesperson, but you can literally look at that information daily. Well, if you know that you need to have 30 sales at $1,000 to bring in $30,000 for the month and hit your $350,000 revenue number for the year, well, that means that you need if I have to have 50 people hit the website, to have 15 people download the free thing, to have 5 people schedule an appointment, to close at 20% and you get one sale. And that's my one sale. All I need to do is make sure that I'm getting at least 50 people hitting the website, 50 right. Qualified people hitting the website looking for information. Yeah. That and every business is like that if you dig in well enough and you understand your numbers, and so you can get into those metrics and figure out what those key ones are. So there in that scenario, I gave you 4 metrics. Yeah. Yeah. You take that along with, okay, what's the lifetime value of that customer? How many more times is that customer going to buy from you? How much did it cost to get those 50 people on the website? And so you got 50 people on the website. You got a cost to acquire the 50 people. You got the one person at $1,000 sale, but that's actually probably closer to $1,500 because I'm going to sell them additional products. So what's the upsell opportunity to that particular client? And so there's 6 metrics. There might be 1 or 2 others that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. And all of a sudden, I got my 7 or 8 metrics that if I track those every day, I know that I'm crushing my $350,000 number at the end of the year. I don't have to dig into my P&Ls and I don't have to wait for somebody to give me that data. Yeah, absolutely. And just as a side note, that speaks to not necessarily AI, but automated functions, right? All of that data, if I'm using it correctly, there's a way to track all of that data, have all of that data fed to me daily. Yeah. And literally just look at a report every day and say, okay, yep, we did this. And it cost me a little bit more to get my 50 people today because I'm paying a pay-per-click or whatever it is, right? And I mean, these are real generic numbers, but it's costing me, $2.50 as opposed to we budgeted for $1.50. But to get my 50 people, per click to get the 50 people on the website. So what's in my ad budget is, $5,000 to get 50 people on the site. Yeah. Not per day, but on a monthly basis. So if I spend $5,000 and it brings me 30 sales at an average of $1,000 or $30,000, that's pretty good ad spend. It's about 16%. So maybe a little bit high, depending on where you're at in maturity of your business. But all of those numbers aggregate into now, just from those handful of numbers, I can tell you whether or not my business is profitable. If I go 3 days in a row without a sale, I recognize there's a problem. And I go back and I look and say, is it okay because I didn't have 50 people hit the website? Is it because I didn't get 15 people to download, my free thing or whatever? Was it because I didn't get 5 appointments scheduled? But either way, I can go back and figure out what my disconnect is.
Yeah, no, and it's as you've been talking and thinking about kind of where you started was on that level of transparency. I kind of want to revisit that real quick because I think even, wherever you land in that, spectrum or continuum of transparency, big fans of goal setting, you and I. In fact, you literally wrote the book on goal setting, Success with Goals. Check it out if you haven't. But I think it's important to set annual goals, do quarterly, strategic planning, revisit the goals, adjust as needed. So those are all things that are really important. But I think, of course, you need to tie that back to metrics, and it's critical you communicate that to the entire organization, so everybody understands, for this year, for this quarter, for this month, for today, what is the metric that we need to be driving as an organization, and what's my part in that? And so that's one kind of strategic thing that you need to be thinking about as a business owner, but also taking that a step further. And a lot of business owners don't do this. It's a scorecard for every employee. So every department, every employee, they have a scorecard, something that they're measured on, something that they're held to, that relates to those larger goals for that quarter, for that year. And when you have that level of clarity around those goals and people's contribution to the goal and what right looks like, your business is that much more successful. So wanted to just kind of touch on that and kind of bring that all together from what you were talking about. And then also one of the things you're talking about is kind of identifying, the leading indicator versus the lagging indicator. So, talked about conversion or click-through rate. Those are the things that if you're focused on those every day, that's going to drive, ultimately the profitability on the back end, but don't focus on the back end, focus on leading indicators. So just kind of.
Yeah, great point. And I didn't use that terminology, but that's exactly right. Yeah, the leading indicators are and see the beauty of using leading indicators is you can actually share that data with your employees and not feel like you're at risk of exposing how much money you're making in the business. I mean, the big rub for most small business owners is they're like, well, I got 6 employees, and if they know that I'm making $300,000 a year in profit, now, first of all, the average person doesn't understand that $300,000 in profit is not $300,000 in profit. There's taxes to pay. There's capital expenditures that come out of that. There's money that I have to put back into the business, or at least have access to for the business. So I can't just go and put that in my pocket necessarily. So a lot of people, that's part of the reason why they don't like to share that. I said before, I'm more of a proponent of sharing that information, because then it helps people understand. They're afraid somebody's going to run off and start the business on their own. And I'm like, hey, if they really have that they're willing to go out and do that, then more power to them. Because quite honestly, at the end of the day, they're going to find out the hard way. It's not that easy.
Right. Yeah.
And they might be a little more humble when they come back to work for you again.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, the reality is that I believe that an educated employee is a more valuable employee. And I think that the scarcity mentality that owners demonstrate when they don't want to share that kind of data and information, really that's a concern, because that is a leading indicator of an owner that likely is not going to scale the business beyond a certain point, because they're not willing to bring people in. They're not willing to trust them enough to help them understand how the business runs and what are some of the key things that they need to be measuring and tracking on a regular basis. And consequently, what ends up happening is now they don't have somebody who can run the day-to-day operations. And so they're always tied to the business, because they're the only one that can look at that information and make those decisions. And that's not accurate. Yeah. But because of that scarcity mentality, they're kind of tied to that.
Yeah. And you mentioned something earlier too, which is when people have that information, right? When they understand the health of the business, if you have the right people, they make better decisions. And I think that's exactly right. So true. I mean, if everybody is committed, if they're really, a culture fit and they're a good team member and they've been with you and they see the vision and they know the business is struggling, they're going to be more cost conscious. They're going to, work that little bit of extra discretionary effort to try to get a couple more clients. They're going to, fight a little harder to retain somebody. And if you have the right team, then I think it helps to be more transparent and to at least, maybe don't share the nuts and bolts and the numbers and EBITDA and all that, but at least share, hey, things are going really well right now, or things are not going so great, and here's where we need to focus to make things better. And so I think having at least some level of transparency, and if you don't feel comfortable, to your point, Eric, you probably have the wrong team, and you may need to reevaluate that, or maybe you need to loosen the reins a little bit. And I think that's important. Right. So great points.
Yeah, and it could be your core team has access to the really important information, but the high level key metrics, everybody needs to know that, because to your point, those being those leading indicators, those are my coaching points.
Yep.
David, we didn't convert at 50% yesterday. We didn't convert at 13% on this category of this part of the business or whatever. And consequently, because we didn't, for instance, we didn't close at 15%, we didn't bring in the number of cell phone sales that we needed to bring in, and your attachment rate wasn't 45% on accessories, so you missed out on this incremental revenue. I mean, literally, you could tear the entire business apart with those 7 to 10 key metrics.
Absolutely.
And exactly where you stand on any given day.
Yeah. Well, it's powerful when you can do that across departments, across teams, and everybody understands everybody else's metrics.
Yes.
That's crazy powerful. And people don't understand that. When sales understands the accounting, and accounting understands marketing, and marketing understands, whatever, right? You break down those silos and everybody has a better sense of what everybody's focused on. You get a more cohesive team.
Absolutely. And to your point, everybody knows what they should be focused on, and they're in alignment with achieving those goals together.
Yep, absolutely.
That everybody sees how their part fits into the big master plan. And that's one of the big disconnects from a leadership perspective, is that I have a vision. It's how my vision is one thing, but how I get people to see the vision and see how their role within the vision helps us accomplish the goal.
Yep.
That's the key. And most leaders have a struggle with the opportunity to be able to get people aligned with the goal. Like the average employee doesn't see how their job of bookkeeping helps the company achieve that goal.
Right. Yep.
Right. And so when the bookkeeper understands how whatever it is they do, it could be a part-time bookkeeper for all intents and purposes. But when they understand how what they do in that role helps the company achieve their overall goal of $10 million or whatever, let's say, all of a sudden they have a better appreciation for what they do and why what they do is so important.
Absolutely.
And they approach their job from a completely different perspective.
Yeah. And critical generationally right now for Gen Z, because they want work that is meaningful. All of those things. So super important right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point.
Awesome. Well, if you guys liked today's episode, we're going to do a part 2. So definitely make sure you subscribe. We'll be covering a few more things that are critical when it comes to knowing your business. We want to hit on a couple today. We've got a few more that we'll review on an upcoming episode. So subscribe and be sure to connect with us on social media. Real quick, just to recap kind of key points from today. We talked about the importance of knowing your market, your industry, your product service, your USP or market dominating position, and your key metrics. And action items for today's episode: use the things that we've talked about today to refine your understanding of your business. Dedicate time, reoccurring, right? Whether that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, or all of the above, to deep dive into those topics and identify where maybe you have gaps in your understanding of your own business. And then schedule time with key personnel at all levels to get feedback on the business. And that's also to share information like key metrics, health of the organization, but also get feedback on, what are you hearing in the industry? What are you hearing in the market? What's the feedback you're hearing from customers on our product or, our services? And that feedback can be really helpful too. So those are kind of the key points and action items from today's episode. Eric, before we wrap up, anything new or exciting happening at My Biz Coaches that you want to talk about?
No, not a ton at My Biz Coach. We got a lot of things coming out of the conference. There's been a lot of great learning lessons and some excellent collaboration opportunities. So very excited about what's coming out of that. Even more so, I would suggest that made some new connections that are going to be good collaborative partnerships over the next couple of months that you're going to see more evolve out of that. But I'm also equally excited about the show and some of the interviews that we have coming up. We have a few newer interview candidates that we've been able to pull together. So I'm excited about what those conversations are going to sound like and the impact that they're going to bring to the show and some of the stories that are associated with that. So I think I'm equally excited about the show as I am about what's going on at My Biz Coaches. So awesome. Appreciate the opportunity to share that.
Absolutely. So, well, good stuff. And again, we'll invite you one last time. Shameless plug here. Be sure to subscribe. And if you subscribe, be sure to click the little bell notification if you're on YouTube so you get notified every time a new episode releases. And we thank you for joining us today on the Biz Coach Show. We'll see you later, Eric.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, David.